With almost 200,000 hotels on the planet, it takes something special to stand out from the crowd.
Some hotels achieve a status that goes beyond 5 stars.
When you go there as a regular person, you are a celebrity.
Partner service.
You have everything you could possibly want.
Want to sleep in Marilyn Monroe's bed? Of course you can, for $7,000 a night.
And satisfy the world's most demanding guests.
It is no surprise for a guest to spend anywhere between $70,000 and $90,000 on room service alone.
Today, the story of one of London's most legendary hotels.
The Ritz is a symbol of wealth. It's a bastion of privilege.
They still have a man who is employed just to touch up the 24-karat gold leaf.
A hotbed of royal intrigue.
Edward VIII would meet Wallis Simpson.
I felt that maybe my lovely ladies-in-waiting might be indiscreet.
It was one of those moments you never forget.
With a hidden past.
They were fraudsters. They decided to hush the whole thing up.
We find out the secret of how to be one of the world's greatest hotels.
The guest is always right, even if he is wrong.
Piccadilly Circus, in the heart of London's West End. An area where the rich and the glamorous eat, shop, and come to be entertained. This neighbourhood is also home to some of London's most celebrated institutions. Fortnum & Mason, the Royal Academy, and probably the most famous hotel in the world.
The Ritz is iconic because it's a hotel that really encapsulates the luxury of a bygone era.
What the Ritz in London has achieved is something quite marvellous. It has turned itself, or been turned by public acclaim, into an adjective. If I say ritzy to you, you'll think, ooh, that's quite impressive.
This 5-star establishment was opened on the 25th of May, 1906, and was designed to reflect the opulence of the 18th century French court.
You enter the Ritz through revolving doors. It's almost like you're in a little fragment of the Palace of Versailles. Before anybody started running down the corridors with pitchforks and revolution on their mind.
The palatial interior meant royalty could feel at home.
Everything is gilded. Everything is this sort of eye-aching Edwardian bling.
Beautiful frescoes on the ceiling, divine chandeliers. It's elegant, it's chic, and it's decidedly French.
When I've gone into the Ritz, it's so over the top that, you know, you are always going to be underdressed in comparison with the decor because it's all glittering and glinting everywhere. And, you know, you sort of think, bring me a powdered wig, 10 tons of taffeta, because I need to be Marie Antoinette to be in here.
It wasn't only the interior that was ostentatious. The building itself made a statement never before seen in London.
It's like a building that's landed from Paris, that somehow found a home on Piccadilly. The architecture of the Ritz is revolutionary. You can see just how the building sits on the street and sits over the pavement.
Its steel frame construction, more commonly used for American skyscrapers, enabled it to rise higher than its neighbours and to perform a clever trick, creating rooms out of thin air.
All of that front slice there is hovering above you as you walk down the pavement of Piccadilly. And that's because the footprint of the building is so small. It's absolutely crammed in there. It splurges over the top so that the bedroom level of the building extends over the pavement. They built the grandest possible building that would fit.
The hotel opened with great fanfare and was immediately fashionable with the global elite. And the man with the vision behind it was Swiss hotelier César Ritz.
César Ritz was the greatest hotelier who ever lived.
The hotel was created at the height of his fame. However, his career in London began at the biggest rival hotel, the Savoy, alongside chef Auguste Escoffier.
Escoffier was one of the great chefs of the Victorian age. He very much brought French cooking to Britain.
Together, over the next 9 years, they made the hotel a huge success to global acclaim, creating a benchmark for the hotel world. But behind the scenes, they were up to no good.
They were fraudsters, essentially, and they were defrauding the Savoy out of thousands. You know, cigars went mysteriously missing. They would order things that they would keep off the books, some things that were on the books that maybe were never there. They were siphoning stuff off, using them for their own purposes. They were fiddling the books at the Savoy.
Ritz was dismissed from the Savoy ungracefully, and the rest of the story, as they say, is a story of revenge.
The pair were implicated in the disappearance of over £3,000 worth of wine and spirits, around £400,000 today, and unceremoniously sacked.
The Savoy decided to hush the whole thing up because it didn't want the scandal. Now, this meant that Escoffier and Ritz had to leave, but it also enabled them to go on to what in a way was the crowning glory of their joint career, the creation of the Ritz Hotel in César Ritz's name. Now, that should really, in a way, never have happened. Ritz should have been in jail. Ritz should have had Ritz slapped on him. Ritz should have been prosecuted in some way. But no, he was allowed to escape into this rather wonderful afterlife and found the most iconic hotel in the world.
But before being sacked, Ritz had already been planning his next move. Alfred Beit, considered to be the richest man in the world, was among the backers he'd gathered to form the Ritz Hotel Syndicate. They opened the first Ritz Hotel in Paris in 1898. 8 years later, after perfecting the vision, Ritz and his team were ready to conquer London.
The Ritz Hotel to César Ritz was really important. He wanted to reclaim his place in London as a rival to the Savoy. So he really sort of poured his heart into the London Ritz.
Ritz set out to claim his crown by creating the ultimate London hotel. He took every idea he introduced at the Savoy and supersized it. It offered 150 luxury rooms, ensuite bathrooms, double glazing and aircon. The price of a double began at 1 guinea, over a week's wages, and it was said to have one of the most beautiful dining rooms in Europe. The extravagant new hotel was an instant success with high society.
The Ritz London was the place to go because the Prince of Wales, who was already the King of England, used to go to the Savoy, said, "Where Ritz goes, I go."
Everybody went to see Ritz. They all came.
With the king in his corner, Ritz had triumphed and exacted his revenge on the Savoy. And now, over 100 years later, both hotels still compete over the same territory. Coming up, the Ritz's royal patronage takes hold.
Edward VIII was a regular there, and he would meet Wallis Simpson.
And one of the worst-kept royal secrets is revealed.
It was very quick. It was over in a flash. They just came out, got in the car. That was it.
Sitting between Mayfair and London's West End, the Ritz Hotel has one of the most prestigious postcodes in London. Born out of revenge to outdo the Savoy, over 100 years later, luxury prevails.
If you want the address in London, this is it, and you're very welcome, as long as you don't need to look at the prices.
That's where I had my first martini, and it always felt tremendously glamorous.
It's the perfect place if you're a well-connected person in London who's plugged into the circuitry of power in this city. You've got the West End theatres over there, all the posh shopping. Down there is Hyde Park. It's really the perfect kind of location if you move in those kind of circles.
For over a century, the hotel has attracted world leaders and A-list celebrities.
I've been to a few parties at the Ritz, and of course the surroundings are so glamorous and so beautiful that it's the perfect backdrop to a great event.
But no matter who you are, dressing down is not an option.
Men must be wearing jackets, no denim is allowed, and even Mick Jagger was turned away once for not dressing correctly to have tea.
Whilst Mick couldn't get no satisfaction, on that occasion, there are some locals who are never turned away, and they live just up the road in Britain's most famous family home.
Buckingham Palace, a great iconic building and only a stone's throw, a brisk walk from the Ritz Hotel, which is why this building and that building have had such a kind of intimate relationship. You can easily walk across from Buckingham Palace to be discreet, to be cloistered over at the Ritz. And the two buildings had this kind of architectural similarity as well. They're both places that say power. They're both residences of the establishment. They're both landmarks in London. One is a real palace, one is a building that certainly thinks it's a palace.
The Ritz is a very favoured venue by the royals. It's a quiet, distinguished, aristocratic elegance in which I think that the royal family feel very at home.
Edward VIII was a regular there. He would dance the night away, and he would also meet Wallis Simpson in the dining room. And it's said that they would have a table close to the door in case they both needed to make a swift exit from prying eyes of high society.
It was one of the Queen Mother's favourite hotels. She loved it when the pianist would play A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square.
And if you're looking for a piece of royal gossip, where better to go?
I began to get to know some of, particularly the Queen Mother's ladies-in-waiting. As a bit of a treat, I used to take them to the Ritz. We were always given a rather lovely table, and it was just set aside a little bit from the other diners so that I felt that maybe my lovely ladies-in-waiting might be indiscreet. I have to tell you, generally they were not, but they gave me information which formed a framework for reports that I was going to do without them telling me any indiscretions.
It's been so popular with British royalty, it was the first hotel in the world to be awarded a royal warrant for services to catering and banquets. And in 2006, the Queen herself hosted a dinner to mark her 80th birthday with closest friends and courtiers. Arthur Edwards has been photographing the royals for over 40 years, and the hotel was the scene for one of his most important shots.
After Diana made that amazing confession, or made that great interview with Panorama, mentioning, you know, the third person in the marriage, which was Camilla, there was massive interest in Camilla.
Following Diana's death in 1997, the interest in Charles and Camilla's relationship intensified, and rumours were spreading that Camilla had even met the young princes.
I was always a great advocate of theirs. We, the royal rat pack, if you like, had been waiting and waiting for the moment that Charles and Camilla would become official. But in January 1999, on a cold day, word went round that something was going to happen. The venue was going to be the Ritz.
An exclusive shot of Charles and Camilla together was worth £100,000 straight off. I got this tip from the palace saying, look, Prince of Wales is going to Camilla's sister's birthday party at the Ritz.
I made lots of phone calls to the Deputy Private Secretary of the Prince. He didn't like to give too much away. Eventually, kind of the code was, well, shall I get someone to put a ladder on the pavement outside the Ritz, because that's what happens. All the TV companies and all the photographers stake their place by putting a ladder there. And he indicated that this might not be a bad idea. So I ran to the news desk and said, get a ladder down to the Ritz, something's going to happen.
Oh, I thought, this is good. So I went to the front row, right opposite the door.
There were 200 photographers there, loads of journalists, all the TV companies.
Americans were there, the Australians were there, everybody was at their crews there.
And out they came. They stepped into this barrage. I cannot tell you. It was flashbulb after flashbulb.
It was like a blitz, the flashes, you know, it was like, it was incredible. And I think poor Camilla was like a rabbit caught in headlights.
And then it was very quick, it was over in a flash. They just came out, got in the car, but that was it. Charles and Camilla, official.
It was a sort of, one of those moments you never forget.
For those of us who can't head back to the palace after a few shandies in the hotel's Rivoli bar, there are 112 rooms to choose from, plus 24 suites, the best of which could set you back over £10,000 a night. Rivals the Savoy, however, have recently opened their own royal suite, averaging £15,000 a night, although significantly bigger than the Ritz equivalent. The hotel may cater for the rich and famous, but its founder certainly wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Cesar Ritz comes from an extraordinarily humble background. He was one of 13 children, the son of a Swiss goat herd. I mean, it sounds like something from The Sound of Music, doesn't it?
The ambitious young Cesar Ritz worked his way up the ladder in some of the best hotels on the continent, where he gathered a loyal clientele of wealthy aristocrats. But perhaps the most defining moment in his career was when he came to the attention of the young Prince of Wales, and it all started with a cigar.
Ritz went to Vienna, and there he saw the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VII. And he remembered the Prince of Wales after the meal liked to have a cigar and drink a glass of alcohol. So when he saw that the Prince of Wales was finished, he came with a tray, a cigar and matches. And the Prince of Wales said, how this young man knows what I like. And this was the beginning of very, very close collaboration.
This was not only the start of his relationship with his most famous patron, but a milestone representing what he believed great service should be.
At the time Ritz started in the luxury hotels, the service people came from private houses. It means they stayed on the wall, waiting that the masters were asking to have something and to serve them. And Ritz said, it's not the way to work. Ritz wanted that the staff acts like he did with the Prince of Wales, anticipate what the client wants, to be always in advance on the desires of the guests. This was the beginning of a different type of service in the hotels.
This style of service has since been emulated in luxury hotels around the world, but it was Ritz who championed it first.
Their service hasn't changed. That's what they're paying for. People want that feeling of, I'm not royalty, but I'm being treated like royalty.
Today, there are 2 full-time members of staff for every guest room, and a team of butlers who are on hand to help with everything from unpacking to party planning.
According to the motto of Cesar Ritz, the guest is always right. The guest is always right, even if he is wrong.
This ethos has spread beyond Ritz's establishment to hotels throughout the world. As a third-generation butler who now trains butlers internationally, Anthony Seddon Holland understands the standard of personal attention that Cesar Ritz demanded for his guests.
Many hundreds of years ago in households in France, there was a male servant who was called the botelier. which basically meant he was the man who was responsible for the storage and service of wine. And that this somehow became, in the English language, butler.
A key part of hotel butlering,
Anthony, butler service,
is checking the room before a guest arrives.
Even though theoretically I know that this is an empty suite, we never assume and presume anything, so I'm going to just double check. Anthony, butler service. Anthony, butler service. Anthony, butler service. Okay. This suite is empty. I can now commence my sweep of this suite just to do a last check to make sure that everything is where it should be and everything is how it should be. The thing that people want to see is service. When it's a butler service, people's perspective is always that that butler service is going to deliver. In a five-star world, you know, you are looking to get everything perfect.
Back at the Ritz Hotel, as a five-star guest, as well as the services of a full-time butler, you can always hop into the hotel's chauffeur-driven rolls if you fancy a spin. And true to Cesar Ritz's wishes, the customer is still always right, whether they are or not.
It's staffed by the most wonderful and discreet and helpful people in the whole of the hotel business. People who have dealt with lots of extraordinary and eccentric requests over the years. It's like, could you go and get me some salt water from Brighton to put in my bath? And they would go down there. You can ask for anything within reason.
Coming up, the hotel becomes a target for the poor working classes.
The marchers decided to storm the Ritz Hotel.
And for that deluxe afternoon tea, you can wave goodbye to nearly £90.
It's a bucket list. If you're just going to do one afternoon tea, you would do the Ritz.
Already the darling of London's luxury hotel scene, it wasn't long before the Ritz became famous for a quintessentially British pastime. New York offers breakfast at Tiffany's. Singapore has its famous sling, but in London, there's afternoon tea at the Ritz.
The afternoon tea drives in thousands of people every day. It's quite extraordinary, and it's definitely something synonymous with London society. Certainly, it'll take you back to that Gilded Age.
It's a bucket list. I think Ritz is, more than any of the other grand dams, its afternoon tea is the one that if you're just going to do one, you would do the Ritz.
Afternoon tea in the hotel has been an institution since the 1920s. There are 18 different types of tea on offer. Or champagne, if you prefer. It was, and still is, served in the Palm Court.
It's beautifully lit through the glass roof. There's a fabulous bronze and marble fountain.
Ritz turned this British tradition that dates back to the 19th century into an art form.
The idea behind the afternoon tea was that you would be talking, chit-chatting. Absolutely everything was designed to be held in the fingers. We have lovely, dainty cakes that can be held without crumbing. In one hand, you can take a simple bite of and continue a conversation, and some simple finger sandwiches. This was about being ladylike and enjoying good tea and enjoying the gossip.
It's been suggested that the brains behind this civilized ritual was a rather hungry duchess. In grand houses of the 19th century, dinner was served at 8. The 7th Duchess of Bedford complained of a sinking feeling around 4 o'clock, so she insisted tea, sandwiches and pastries be served at this point every day.
It wasn't long before the Duchess of Bedford was inviting her friends to indulge in her boudoir in this wonderful, simple feast. What she did do is popularise the idea of taking a small snack just to fill in the gap between lunch and dinner.
The trend spread from the private drawing rooms of the aristocracy to chic London hotels.
This was quite a big step because women were not often seen out socially. The men enjoyed their coffee houses, but for women, they were trapped indoors. So when the doors flung open on established hotels offering the opportunity of afternoon tea, this was something that was very popular and became incredibly fashionable. And nobody made it more fashionable than the Ritz.
Nowadays, it's as fashionable as ever, and to accommodate the hordes, afternoon tea is now served well into the evening. Having tempted women from their boudoirs to the Palm Court for tea, Ritz wanted to make the most of this lucrative clientele.
Ritz wanted to attract a bigger female clientele. Particularly, he wanted to attract women who would come and dine unescorted, which was a bit of a taboo in that period.
To convince women to dine in the hotel restaurant, Ritz had a trick up his sleeve.
Cesar Ritz is one of the first hoteliers to actually realise the importance of lighting design. Lighting is incredibly important. It affects everyone's mood, it affects the ambience of a space, it can dramatically change an atmosphere. Nowadays, we've got an endless wealth of technology, new light sources that can be used, LEDs, colour tones, even ones that are programmed on your mood and how you arrive to a space. They look at adjusting the lighting to suit you as you walk around.
When Cesar Ritz was planning his hotels, the electric light bulb was a recent invention. He wanted to make the most of this new technology.
Cesar Ritz realised that concentrating on the colour and the tones were very important to him to make sure he got that absolutely perfect.
He'd had experience in the past of diners sitting at tables under unflattering light. And if you're sitting under light that isn't showing you at your best, then you're maybe not going to have a great time. And the person sitting opposite you isn't going to be looking their best either.
It was all about flattering the complexions of the female guests. And he experimented for many, many hours using his wife as his model to get the perfect lighting.
So we're recreating his experiment and having a look at a number of different colours and tones and seeing the effects that this creates. So we've got a lovely blue here. It's slightly cooler in terms of the colour tone. So looking at a number of different warmer tones, we've got oranges. So that creates that lovely, healthy glow. It might be a bit too intense.
At the time, the women had to be very pale. Even they put powder on their skin to look more whitish. And the artificial light of the time was very ugly. So they looked a bit greenish.
So red, for example, would sort of warm the tone up, so it wouldn't be as pale. Looking at a number of different colours away from that red and going almost to yellow, which might be too intense and has more of a greeny tinge, so might make you look a little bit unhealthy.
He found out that the complexion of a woman appears best in pink light. So all the lampshades at all the Ritz hotels were pink.
So the end result is this lovely peach blush tone that really complements and gives that lovely warm glow.
With a colour palette that mixed rose pink, salmon and peach, female guests were guaranteed to look their best, no matter how much they may have drunk.
Ritz started a kind of revolution in the lighting of public spaces. If you bathe your diners in this flattering light, then not only does that add to their experience, but it makes them stay longer, it makes them spend more in the hotel as well.
Creative lighting's one thing, but it's great food that gets bums on seats. And today, it's the creations coming from the kitchen that the hotel's most famous for.
I don't think the Ritz would be what it is today if it hadn't had such an amazing restaurant. You know, they've got their first Michelin star a few years ago. So yeah, it's still a sort of defining luxury dining in London.
When you visit the Ritz, you sit down for dinner, and there is a kind of choreography about it. There's a kind of simultaneity about what goes on. You're served by more than one person, so that two waiters will arrive at your table and metal cloches will cover the food, and at a very precise moment they will be whipped off. And it's really like attending a kind of opening night. You feel that something special has been generated just for you, that almost like a magic act is being performed at your table.
This theatrical flamboyance is the legacy of César Ritz's partner in crime, French chef Auguste Escoffier.
Escoffier and César Ritz were very much a double act. Escoffier in the kitchens, turning out the most exquisite food. Ritz ruling the restaurant and the hotel and making sure that his guests had their every need catered to.
Ritz had employed Escoffier in 1884 as head chef of the Grand Hotel in Monte Carlo. There they formed an alliance that bore fruit all over Europe.
Ritz and his ally Escoffier really transformed the way that the modern hotel works. They invented it, really. César Ritz was the man who kind of looked after the public domain of the hotel. And down below in the kitchen, Escoffier reorganized how you work in a kitchen along military lines. Chefs work in brigades, and they really made this experience extremely efficient so that guests would remain satisfied.
We are looking at a time when England was cooking following Eliza Acton, who wrote a cookbook in 1860. It's about 500 pages thick. It contains recipes like you have to boil a carrot for 25 minutes.
A stark contrast to the menu of this hotel's opening night.
It was an entirely French menu. What we are seeing is things like sole cooked in champagne, we're seeing langoustine, we're seeing lots of seafood going on. This would have been incredible food. You know, nobody would have thought of cooking a sauce with champagne.
Escoffier, at some point in his career, was asked, why don't you learn English? You were here now for years. And he said, oh, no, this is much too dangerous. If I speak English, I might cook like them.
Today, the hotel's menu still bears the hallmarks of Escoffier's influence.
The beauty of the Ritz is that the cuisine has always been impossibly French, very rich. Everything lathered in cream and butter, and it was just soufflé after caviar, and it was wonderful.
What we are seeing is this grand French cooking still, but with a real British flair.
The hotel has always been associated with the extravagant and the indulgent. But during the Great Depression of the 1930s, this lavish lifestyle was in stark contrast to those struggling to survive outside.
The Ritz is a symbol of wealth. It's a bastion of privilege. So if you don't like privilege, the Ritz is where you go to protest against that privilege.
The economic crisis brought on by the Wall Street crash had closed mines, factories and shipyards across the country. Groups of protesters began to march on London demanding their right to work. One group headed straight for the Ritz.
They got inside during afternoon tea and actually fell silent, amazed by the opulence they saw around them.
It was a moment that was best documented by Lady Diana's step-grandmother, Dame Barbara Cartland, who was taking tea at the time.
She remembered the unease and the discomfort that the diners felt and the silence that fell over that room. And she knew what was going on there. When you have the most privileged people in London, caught with with their sandwich with the crusts cut off, poised before their mouths, and in come the hunger marchers.
Cartland is said to have remarked afterwards, We deserve everything we get from the unions now, quite frankly, everything we get. It was the same form of protest used in 1936 by 200 men from the Tyneside town of Jarrow, now famously known as the Jarrow Marches. They walked 300 miles to petition Parliament. Although initially ignored, this was seen as a turning point in shaping a more equal society. Coming up, the luxury palace's dirty secret.
It was a sad building. It was rather infested.
And the hotel becomes the deathbed of choice for a former Prime Minister.
It was effectively a very upmarket hospice.
The Ritz Hotel has been presiding over this busy corner of central London for over a century.
Every time I go through the door, I feel as though I'm entering a world in which everything is easy, everything is smooth, everything is much more relaxed than it is just outside on bustling Piccadilly.
During the Second World War, London became a haven for governments in exile, and royal families from across Europe set up residence in the city's great hotels, with the hotel on Piccadilly a popular choice.
The Ritz did attract a fairly fancy clientele, some of whom were rather dodgy. The most celebrated wartime resident of the Ritz Hotel was King Zog of Albania. The Albanian royal family came over to the Ritz. It was rumoured that they paid their bills there in gold bullion that they brought with them in their luggage from the National Bank of Albania.
The Ritz was built with what was then a very novel steel frame construction. They closed off the top 2 floors of the hotel, meaning that the rest of the building was considered a very safe place, both to sleep and to enjoy yourself. When the air raids came, people simply went to the lower floors and were quite happy in the knowledge that bombs wouldn't get through. The Ritz became very much a melting pot and a meeting place.
And with the hotel's reputation for discretion, it developed its own subculture.
During the Second World War, it becomes a kind of haven for what we would call gay culture.
However, this wartime opportunity was more risky for some.
There was a kind of anxiety about the security problem of that and the blackmail problem, because the Ritz was kind of the staff canteen for many in the security services. MI5's wartime HQ was just around the corner, so that was who was down there as well.
After the war, the once glittering London hotel started to lose some of its glamour.
There are moments from the past of the Ritz, in the 60s and 70s, where people in very expensive rooms would be ringing down to the concierge and saying, "There are some rats dancing a ballet in my room." It was a sad building. It was rather infested, and it also didn't treat its architectural heritage very well.
The hotel was owned by the Bracewell-Smith family for nearly 30 years until 1976, followed by the Trafalgar House Group, each seemingly doing little to preserve the grandeur. But in 1995, the billionaire Barclay brothers came to the rescue, buying the hotel for £75 million and spending a further £40 million on a full-scale refurbishment.
It was rescued and returned to that kind of gilded state. So it looks very sharp and it looks very beautiful now.
My favourite room, without a shadow of a doubt, is the so-called banqueting room. And it's lined in red silk damask. The ceiling is coffered. It is one of the most opulent and beautiful rooms in London.
You are going in there, and it would be the same as if you were going in there in 1906. They still have a man who is employed just to touch up the 24-karat gold leaf in all the rooms.
Its grandeur has always attracted those in power.
Being relatively close to Westminster, as well, of course, as Buckingham Palace, the Ritz has also been very important for politicians. They greatly enjoy conducting their social and sometimes political lives there.
It was a favourite of former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who would spend the final 3 months of her life there.
When Margaret Thatcher moved in for the last weeks, months of her life, it was effectively being a very upmarket hospice. She was not expected to recover, she was not expected to be moving out. The owners simply said, stay here as long as you can.
Mrs. Thatcher succeeded in dying at the Ritz, largely, I think, thanks to the patronage of the Berkeley brothers, who are very much her political allies. This is where people went to have audiences with her, where her friends went to see her and pay their last respects to her in those last days. And the hotel protected her during that period. That's where Mrs. Thatcher met her end, in quite a kind of carefully managed environment.
Cesar Ritz himself died over a century ago in 1918, aged 68. This grand hotel on Piccadilly would be his swan song. After its opening, he retreated to Switzerland, the years of exacting work having taken their toll. King Edward VII described him as the king of hoteliers and the hotelier of kings.
If I meet Cesar Ritz today, it would be the greatest pleasure of my life. I think I have still lots of things to learn from him.
The principles of hospitality he instituted are upheld in hotels across the world.
His name is in the dictionary as a definition of luxury, so he is forever embedded in our psyche as the man who brought us that sort of really over-the-top opulence. And, I mean, it's an amazing legacy, really.
The Ritz today is one of the greatest hotels in the world. Will live forever because luxury can be bought, but history must be earned.
The Ritz is one of those timeless places. Whatever the decade, whatever the century, will always be there.
The Ritz is a brand so powerful that I very much hope it stays forever.